Hello, you are watching the planetary stage at Postman Galaxy. I'm Sue, your MC on the developer experience track. If you have any questions during the talks, please pop them into the Slido tab over on the right of Hopin. And as always, please make sure you've read the event code of conduct. You're going to find that in the reception area. So, no one denies how important documentation is. It can genuinely make the difference between success and failure for a dev tool, and yet we still neglect it. When it comes to resources, we treat it as an afterthought. What's that all about? Why are we still doing that? Anyway, here to talk to us about writing docs worth reading, please welcome Kaylyn Sigler from our Postman Galaxy sponsor, Datadog.
Hi, thank you for the good introduction, Sue. Thank you all for coming today. So today we're going to talk about how you can use data to make your docs better. I'm hoping that you're going to walk away with some ideas about using data to understand more about your developers, their successes, their frustrations, and also how they're using your site. So I'm Kaylyn Sigler. I'm the team lead for documentation at Datadog. If you don't know, Datadog is an observability platform that provides full visibility across your infrastructure and network, across your applications and services, and all the way to your end users. And when I'm not writing documentation, I really enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons and also hiking with my husky Juno. All right, so here it is. It's what you've all been waiting for. What is the magic number? When I say magic number, of course, I mean that we would all love there to be like an overall single success metric for how successful your doc site is. Something like conversions or website traffic to lead ratio, something really clean that you can just tell this documentation is working and it's working well. Unfortunately, there's not a magic number. Measuring how successful your docs are isn't clean cut since documentation sites often have more than one purpose, right? They're not just marketing sites, they're not just support sites, they're not just help sites. They're trying to solve a bunch of different problems at once. So if there's not a magic number, how are you supposed to measure success? So start by understanding and asking yourself, why have you spent such a large portion of your life building out this documentation site anyway? What are the main goals here? Uh, so at Datadog, we definitely want to help people get started quickly and then build on that foundation, right? Get something up and running in only a couple of minutes. And then once you have something up and running, hone it into really what you're trying to do. Um, we also want to defer support tickets, though this isn't, the entire purpose of the site. And then we also want to be able to show our technical prospects whether or not you support the needed functionality that they're looking for. So the goal here isn't necessarily to convert these prospects. The goal is to educate them, right? The same as the rest of your doc site. So these goals have been fairly similar for me on every docs team I've ever been on. So hopefully it's something you can kind of think about and understand, how this would fit, something similar would fit in with your own site. So let's take these thoughts and these goals and categorize them a bit more. So here I've got 4 logical goals with the types of contents that we want to write to solve that problem. So starting here with a quick starts, this includes, your getting started guides, use case types of pages, stuff with the basic information that's meant to get your developers up and going quickly. Then you have the information that's about building. These are your more advanced guides, your references, just that have all of the options, especially your API references. And these are for somebody who is started with you, but they're trying to hone in their implementation. Another one is the troubleshooting. Troubleshooting pages address really specific issues that your developers commonly face. And then you probably have pages like compatibility lists, other types of references that have the goal of telling potential users, hey, we do this thing that you are actually trying to do. Okay, so now that we have these categories, what do we actually do with them, right? So this is where you want to ask yourself, okay, what actions are the users actually taking? that determine whether they are or are not successful. And based off of those actions that users are taking on your page, how can you, definitively and metrically measure that? So I want to start here with the quick start in building goals to talk about specific metrics that we look at to try to understand what our developers are going through on our pages. Everybody is so careful about it. You've documented it, you've checked it a bunch of times with a bunch of different stakeholders, but how do you actually tell if it's working and if it's, they were able to quickly get started or quickly build on their implementation? So really quick, I want to do an interlude here to stop and talk about tools, because obviously you can't measure data without various types of tools. So I try to indicate on each slide which tools that we use to collect the data that I'm talking about. In some cases, when it makes sense, I'll go sort of in depth into them. So obviously we're using Postman. Hotjar is a really cool analytics tool that gives you visualizations into particular page elements. Google Analytics is, the out-of-the-box thing that almost everybody has implemented. Uh, then at Datadog, we use Zendesk for support, and then we also dog food a lot of our own product at Datadog. For search, we're using the Google Search Console because that just comes with your Google Analytics instance. We use Algolia for our internal search, and then we'll also look at these really cool search visualizations that Answer the Public does. So I'm starting with this one because it's fairly low-hanging fruit. Most sites have Google Analytics set up, and if not, it's very straightforward to implement, so you should have Google Analytics set up. Looking at the time spent on the page metric, but combining them with other metrics can be a really good page-level diagnostic tool. And this is such low-hanging fruit because this just comes out of the box with a basic Google Analytics implementation. There's nothing extra that you need to do to be able to see this stat. So looking at this example here, the users are spending about 30 minutes on average on this page. And when they're talking about the average time on page, they're looking at active use. So if you open a tab and then open a bunch of other tabs and go somewhere else, they're not tracking that. They're tracking the time that's active on each tab. And so these steps should only take maybe 10, 15 minutes tops, right? So why are people spending an active amount of 30 minutes on this page? So in this case, what was happening was that one of the steps was completely wrong and it was stopping people in their tracks and they weren't able to continue past that step. So they were trying to troubleshoot it, trying to use the docs page. So it was a simple matter of updating the single step that was wrong and that was shattering things for people. And that's usually what the problem is when people are spending longer on a page than you'd expect. There's something broken in your steps or, there's something wrong that they're just not able to move through it successfully. If you have a page where you're expecting, oh, this is going to take 8 minutes to implement, and people are only spending an average of 2 minutes on that page, that's usually a sign that the wrong people are landing there at the wrong time. So the users that are landing there, they're not finding what they're looking for. They're looking for something else. So that's definitely worth, combining with some other search stats, understanding how people are getting there and how you could fix that. So this is something that doesn't always occur to people, but it's always really interesting to track where people are clicking from your page. So are you sending your user to a specific page in your UI or an SDK to set something up? So this isn't showing ultimate success with the action. But so for this example, ultimate success is that they go through these steps, they set this up, and they start seeing data in Datadog. So you're not really, in this case, looking at whether they're ultimately successful. What you're looking at is, did they actually go somewhere and do something that you're telling them in one of these steps to do? And this can give you some really good insight into how users are thinking. If you're expecting them to click something and they're not, it's definitely worth investigating. Could the design be improved on your site to make it more clear that it's a clickable element? Could people be coming to this page more to investigate rather than to go through with the setup? These are definitely all things worth improving. You can use custom campaigns on Google Analytics or logs tracking on Datadog. But this can give you really good insight into how many people are actually doing this thing that you are asking them to do. And then, of course, taking this to the next level is seeing how successful they are with this end goal. So, going from, this docs page to customers on this page, are they actually seeing this data in Datadog? And in order to get this sort of information, it usually requires some level of development work using funnels or some form of cookies, or maybe logging into your doc site to track, end to end. If someone has hit the page and then hit the site and then is actually starting to see data. Um, so Google Analytics domain tracking looks sort of promising for this, but this is usually has to be somewhat custom to what your individual setup is. So another low-hanging fruit is to look at your page views in Google Analytics. So what you want to look at here is, do they actually seem to make sense? This One side note here is that this may work straight out of the box with Google Analytics, but it's also might be worthwhile to consider that you're looking at just all of the unfiltered page views on your site. So this could include internal, external. So it's sometimes worth filtering it by IP level to see if it's interesting to look at, what are your internal folks looking at, what are external folks looking at. Um, so this is, like, really helping you understand, what is important to your developers. Is there something, like, really random that's showing up at the top of this page view site? Something that you wouldn't expect, to be at the top. If the page is ranked higher than you expect, this usually means that someone or some place is unexpectedly linking to this page. So it's worth combining with other stats to understand why this page is so highly ranked. But the opposite can happen too, right? You can have this really important page that is just absolutely critical to the success of your developers, and if it's ranked really low, that usually means that the page isn't optimized enough. You should try linking to it from a bunch of different places in your site. Try putting it in like a higher level of the hierarchy of your site. Try to optimize your search a little bit more to really make it really clear to your users that this is important for them to be successful with your product. So this is a heat map from Hotjar. It's beautiful. It's really cool. So what this is showing you is an experiment randomly over thousands of user sessions, and it's showing you a visual map of how users are interacting with the elements on your page. So just taking a look at this, right? You have this Run with Postman button on our main API page. That's getting a ton of hits. The other thing here that's getting a whole bunch of hits is, how to get started quickly with our libraries. The links that go directly out to our libraries, right? So this is what this is telling us is that the users who are using Datadog's API really want these code languages, really want to get started quickly in a tool like Postman. So this is really interesting because in this case, I'm seeing what I hope to see, but sometimes this can give you really unexpected information. Like maybe there's something really lower on the page that users are looking at. That it might be worth making higher, or understanding why users are attracted to that information. So it really helps give you insight into kind of how your developers are thinking when they're interacting with your pages. We also use Hotjar to ask very specific questions to page users. This does tend to bias toward people who were not successful with doing what they were trying to do on your page. But this sort of diagnostic data, it can be super useful for figuring out if there's specific issues in your content. The key here is to be really specific, though. I've seen a lot of docs pages have, "What did you think of this page?" Thumbs up, thumbs down. And I don't really find that data very meaningful because what does thumbs down really mean? Does it mean they couldn't set it up successfully? Does it mean that that was not the page that they were looking for? So asking specific questions that can give you meaningful data is really important here. Where you want to start is by having some sort of element on your docs page that asks the user, were you able to do this thing that we're describing on this page? So in this case, were you able to actually install this integration successfully? Um, and so then if they say no, you want to ask them why. Why didn't it work? It's good to have a few pre-made options here, but it's also really good to have just an open space that developers can fill in. You may not be aware of this, but developers have opinions, and they're usually very happy to share them if you give them the opportunity to do so. Um, and then, of course, if things are really frustrating here, you want to give people the ability to reach out to support to get extra help if they're really stuck and they need help more quickly than you'll be able to update the docs page. So then you end up with a ton of really meaningful data about exactly what is working and what is not. You can use this data to spot specific issues, maybe a step's wrong, it's breaking things for people. But you can also see broader problems, like maybe an entire page needs revamped because nobody is successful with it. But you can also, the gaps help you see where your users are really successful. So, if there's a page that never comes up and never gets answered, or the only answers you get are that people set it up just fine, that's really good information to know that, you've hit the mark with that particular page. So this next one is pretty much a shout out to QA people everywhere, but a really important thing to do is to test to make sure your API actually works. More than once, I've gotten complaints about docs that have turned out to be actually an issue with the API, right? Something's gone down, there's been a regression, something's not working the way that it's supposed to. So Postman and Datadog both offer automated API testing, and we all know that automation makes the world go round. I haven't had a chance to dig much into it yet, but I also think Postman Workspaces is going to be a really interesting social tool for being able to interact with people live while they're trying to use your API. So you'll be able to get live feedback if things aren't working. It's also really interesting to look at your API usage data. How many people are using your API and how are they accessing it? If you have spent a ton of time documenting your Java library, but then you look at your API usage data and it turns out that Python's overwhelmingly the most popular one, you might have an issue and you might need to shift the focus to spend the time and effort on the ones that people are using the most often. So when it comes to adding and tracking impactful troubleshooting information, working closely with the people who actually talk to your customers every day is key. So I'm talking like support people, CSMs, product managers, account managers, different companies call it different things, but you want to find those frontline people who are interacting with customers. Almost every one of these people will be able to tell you just off the top of their heads a very common implementation problem that their users are seeing. And they're also always very happy to tell you that they would just love to have a link to specific docs for that problem that they could just send to their customers. So you want to start with figuring out how your support people are categorizing things, right? Like, what do these tags actually mean? They usually have their own unique system, and understanding how that system works is kind of key to being able to add good troubleshooting information. So once you understand those tags and work with your allies over, in the support team to figure out what these common issues are, that's where you can kind of hone in these tags, hone in on putting a lot of very specific effort on solving these issues for customers in your support team. So then I like to set a goal of decreasing ticket response time for the people helping customers with these specific problems. Time to close ticket is a little bit better than just the metric of trying to defer tickets. Obviously deferring tickets is the ultimate goal. You want to help your customers be successful so that they don't have to ask support. But, for various reasons, often customers aren't actually able to look at specific pages in the documentation. They don't always find it when they need it. So since they're very often going to just ask support anyway, it's much more impactful to focus on helping your support teams be able to answer more quickly and more effectively. And it's also something that if it's never something you've looked at, you can have a lot of really quick wins here for figuring out what these common issues for them are. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but sometimes it might make sense to track where your product signups are happening from on your docs page, because they are happening, right? People are going from your docs to signing up, but the goal here isn't to measure success by driving signups, right? You're not having that turnover metric, but the goal here is to understand what information these technical prospects are looking at when they decide to go for a sign up. Very often it's exactly what you'd expect, some compatibility list that shows that you support the thing that they're trying to do, or, like getting started pages or use case pages. But sometimes it's completely unexpected. So at a previous company I was at, we found that we were getting loads of signups from a page that describes how to use a really legacy part of the product. So once we understood that people were signing up from this page, we were able to kind of shift its focus to make it much more of a getting started page instead of an advanced usage page, since that's what customers were clearly looking for from that page. And then last but not least, you cannot forget search. It's an important element, but you shouldn't go crazy optimizing your docs for search in, like a marketing-y, ideal SEO sort of way. Google and other search engines are set up to favor things like product documentation. Um, and so if you're writing accurate, good, non-duplicated content with the genuine goal of actually helping your developers be successful, then the search results kind of follow naturally. But using search tools can help you identify gaps in your content, and it also gives you some insight into how your developers are landing on your pages and also what's most important to them. So this image is using the tool Answer the Public. This creates a cloud of top phrases searched by using specific keywords. This can be very helpful for identifying gaps in your content. Are you not answering one of these questions? But one thing to keep in mind here is that it doesn't sort it by the actual numbers, right? It's just telling you the questions that are being asked. So if you're seeing something here and you're like, oh, this is a huge gap, it's definitely worth comparing with like your Google search or your internal search analytics to see how many times people are actually asking that question or if it was just a one-off type of thing. So seeing if it's an actual gap. So this visualization is using the keyword Datadog, and it's looking at what are the questions people asking around Datadog. So again, I'm Kaylyn Sigler, and I'm from Datadog. Thank you for listening to me talk about this. I hope you have some ideas now about how you can use this type of data to understand your developers and help them a little bit more and understand where their successes and their frustrations are. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks again for attending.